one wrong move, one threat, and one truth that no one in town saw coming. When a white police officer used force on a pregnant black woman, he had no idea he had crossed the line and awakened a storm he couldn't control. This story will not only make you angry, it will make you believe again in ordinary people with extraordinary strength. If you believe in justice, subscribe to our channel, share this video, and let us know where you're watching from, because change doesn't come from far away. It begins in your very own community. It was a bright sunny morning in Ravenhill, Mississippi. The sky was clear and a gentle breeze whispered through the trees lining the quiet streets. Nina stepped out of her beautiful white brick house, her face glowing with a warm smile. She was a kind, caring, and wealthy black woman. And today she had a special plan. Nina was 7 months pregnant, her belly round and heavy, but she carried herself with grace. Her husband Elijah had been away on a business trip for days, and she was excited to surprise him with his favorite dinner when he returned later that evening. As she walked down the street, she hummed softly, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding a small shopping list. "You're going to love what I'm making for Daddy," she said softly, speaking to her unborn child. She gently rubbed her belly, feeling a soft kick in response. Nina chuckled, her eyes twinkling with joy. "I knew you'd like that." Nina loved these short walks to the store. Not only did it give her the physical activity she needed, but it also allowed her to enjoy the fresh air and greet her neighbors. People in the community knew her well and often waved as she passed by, their smiles reflecting her own. She moved at a slow, steady pace, careful not to overexert herself but feeling a sense of happiness and purpose with each step. The world felt peaceful and she was content. As she approached the corner, Nina's mind wandered to the meal she was planning. She thought of Elijah's smile when he'd walked through the door, tired from his trip but delighted to see the feast she had prepared. It had been a while since she had cooked a special dinner, and this was her way of showing him how much she missed him. But then the peace was shattered. A loud screech broke through the quiet morning as a police car pulled up beside her, its tires grinding against the pavement. Nina turned, startled, as the car's window rolled down, revealing Officer Cole. He was a white cop new to the area, and he had quickly gained a reputation for being rude and unnecessarily aggressive. With a cold, stern look on his face, he stared at Nina, his eyes narrowing as if he had already decided she was guilty of something. "Stop right there," Cole barked, his tone sharp and commanding. Nina froze, confusion washing over her. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Is there a problem, officer?" Cole didn't answer her question. Instead, he stepped out of the car, his eyes still fixed on her. "I need to see your ID," he demanded, walking towards her with a sense of authority that felt more intimidating than official. Nina hesitated, a flicker of fear sparking inside her. "I'm just going to the store," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why do you need to see my ID?" The officer's expression grew more hostile. "Because I said so," he snapped. "You're acting suspicious and I want to know what you're doing out here." Nina felt a chill run down her spine. She had done nothing wrong, but the way he looked at her made her feel like she was already guilty of something. Her heart pounded, but she took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just heading to the store to pick up some things." "Just show me your ID," Cole yelled, cutting her off. Nina quickly fumbled in her purse and handed him her ID, hoping to defuse the situation. Trembling as she passed it to him, and she glanced around, noticing that a few people had started to watch. The tension was thick, and she felt as if every breath was becoming harder to take. Cole snatched the ID from her hand, glancing at it briefly before shoving it back at her. "What are you really doing out here?" he asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. Nina's eyes widened. "I told you I'm just going to the store," she said, her fear turning to frustration. "Can I go now?" But Cole didn't let it go. He took a step closer, his face inches from hers. "You think you can talk back to me?" he sneered. "You're acting like you have something to hide." Nina's heart pounded, and she could feel the tension rising around her. "I don't have anything to hide," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, I just want to go to the store." And then everything happened so fast. Cole suddenly raised his voice, shouting at her, accusing her of resisting. "Stop resisting," he yelled, drawing the attention of more bystanders. Nina was shocked, her mind reeling. She hadn't done anything. She tried to step back, putting her hands up to show she wasn't a threat, but Cole's aggression only seemed to escalate. Without warning, he lunged forward and pushed her. Nina stumbled backward, struggling to keep her balance, but her heavy belly made it difficult. "Stop, please," she cried. But her words only seemed to make Cole angrier. He stepped forward again, and before anyone could react, he kicked her in the stomach. The force knocked her to the ground, and she cried out in pain, clutching her belly as tears streamed down her face. "My baby," she gasped, her voice breaking. The world seemed to stop for a moment. There was only silence, and then the chaos erupted. The onlookers rushed towards her, horrified by what they had just seen. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted, while others tried to help Nina, who was lying on the ground, writhing in pain. Her hands cradled her belly, and she whispered, "Please, my baby, please be okay," over and over, as if trying to comfort herself. Cole, meanwhile, stood back, his face expressionless. "Everyone back off," he shouted, trying to regain control of the situation. "I'm handling this." But no one was listening to him anymore. They were focused on Nina, their eyes filled with anger, shock, and disbelief. How could this happen? How could a police officer do something so cruel, so senseless? The sound of sirens echoed down the street, growing louder as an ambulance sped towards them. Nina's vision blurred as the pain became too much, but she could hear the voices around her, filled with fear and urgency. "She's pregnant, be careful," a woman said, as paramedics rushed to her side. They quickly assessed her condition, carefully lifting her onto a stretcher. As the ambulance doors closed, taking Nina away, the onlookers turned their attention to Cole. He tried to maintain his authority, but it was clear that the situation had spiraled out of his control. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a street filled with tension, fear, and the unanswered question that hung in the air: why? The peace of the morning was shattered, and nothing would ever be the same. The town of Harrison was usually quiet, but by the afternoon it was buzzing with outrage. The incident involving Nina had spread like wildfire. Videos taken by bystanders showed the horrifying moment when Officer Cole kicked Nina, and the footage quickly made its way to social media. People from all over town and the country were sharing, commenting, and demanding answers. Hashtags like "Justice for Nina" and "Stop Police Brutality" were trending, and the outrage was palpable. People were furious, their anger growing with each new detail they learned about what had happened to the pregnant woman who was simply on her way to the store. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the atmosphere was tense. Nina was rushed into the emergency room, overwhelmed by pain and fear. Doctors and nurses worked quickly, their movements precise and voices calm but urgent. The physical pain was intense, but it was the fear for her unborn child that hurt most. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Please let my baby be okay." A nurse held her hand gently and reassured her, "We're going to take care of both of you. Stay strong." Nina nodded weakly, her body trembling, silently praying for her baby's life. The trauma had caused a placental abruption, and doctors needed to perform an emergency C-section immediately. Moments later, the door opened and Tasha, Nina's best friend, rushed in. Her face was filled with panic and anger. She had heard what happened and came straight to the hospital. "Nina," she cried, hurrying to her side. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Nina struggled to speak through the pain. "Tasha, I'm scared," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Tasha squeezed her hand tightly. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Just focus on you and the baby. We'll get through this together." Nina nodded, though the fear still gripped her heart. Tasha stayed with her until the doctors wheeled Nina away for surgery, quietly praying for a miracle. Meanwhile, Nina's husband Elijah was in a meeting when he got the call. Seeing Tasha's name on the screen, he instantly knew something was wrong. He stepped out and answered. Tasha's voice was frantic. "Elijah, you need to come now. Nina's been hurt. She's in surgery." Everything stopped. Without a second thought, Elijah rushed to the airport. Though trained to stay calm as a CIA operative, nothing prepared him for this. This wasn't a mission, it was personal. It was his family. When Elijah finally arrived at the hospital, Tasha was waiting for him, eyes swollen from crying. "Where is she?" he asked, barely holding it together. Tasha quietly led him down the hall. Tasha led Elijah to the waiting area. "She's in surgery," she said, shaken. "They're trying to save the baby." Elijah collapsed into a chair, his hands trembling. "Who did this?" he asked. Tasha hesitated. "A cop, Officer Cole. He attacked her. There are videos. Elijah's eyes darkened. Where's he now? Hours passed. Finally, a doctor approached. Mr. Brooks, your wife is stable. The surgery was difficult, but we delivered your son. He's small and needs close monitoring, but they're both fighters. Elijah rushed to Nina's room. She was pale but awake. Elijah, I'm sorry. I tried to protect him, she sobbed. He held her hand. You did. You're both safe now. But inside he was already planning. He wouldn't let this go. The next morning, Elijah went to the police station. The officers were cold and dismissive. Cole acted within his rights, they claimed, despite the videos. Elijah's anger boiled. It was clear the system was protecting Cole. If Elijah wanted justice, he'd have to get it himself. He had the skills and now the motive. As Elijah left the police station, his phone flooded with messages and videos of the incident. The world was watching. Quietly, he sent a coded message to old contacts, activating a hidden part of his life. Back at the hospital, he sat beside Nina. She asked, "Is everything okay?" He smiled gently. "It will be," he said, already planning what came next. At home, Elijah's calm face hardened. In the dim light, he made brief, coded phone calls to people who understood his world: intelligence, secrets, power. This wasn't a mission. It was personal. Flashbacks showed his training, tracking, gathering intel, staying invisible. But now he wasn't hiding. He was hunting. And Cole had no idea. The next morning, Cole opened his door to find envelopes filled with old complaints, confidential files, and surveillance photos. One note read, "We know everything." His hands shook. His car wouldn't start. His phone glitched. The same unmarked car passed by his house. At work, his colleagues avoided him. Power had shifted. Cole was no longer in control, and someone wanted him to feel it. Cole noticed his coworkers whispering, avoiding eye contact. The rumors were spreading. When he spoke to his bosses, they brushed him off. One warned, "Clean this up before it gets worse." He was clearly on his own. That night, Cole sat alone, overwhelmed by fear. Strange packages and letters surrounded him. Then a new message appeared on his phone, a video link. He clicked it. It was a live feed of his own living room, recorded from a hidden camera. The camera zoomed in on a note placed on his coffee table. Shaking, Cole read, "You messed with the wrong family. Make it right or the world will know everything." Chills ran through him. Someone had broken into his house, watched him, and vanished without a trace. This wasn't random, it was calculated. Cole realized he was being hunted by someone powerful, someone who knew all his secrets. He considered calling the police, but what would he say? Who would believe him? He was out of time and out of options. Meanwhile, in a quiet office, Elijah calmly watched the feed end on his screen. The warning had been delivered. Now it was up to Cole. It was time to see if the officer would do the right thing. If not, there were other plans ready, and they wouldn't be as kind. The next day, the town buzzed with curiosity. News had spread that the officer involved would speak publicly. Videos of the incident had gone viral, and the nation was watching. Outside the police station, reporters waited, cameras rolling. When the officer finally stepped out, people were shocked. He looked pale and nervous, not the confident man they remembered. His hands shook as he adjusted the mic. "What I did was wrong," he said. "I overstepped, and I regret it deeply. I apologize to Nina and her family. I'm resigning effective immediately." The crowd whispered, stunned. No one expected this. From the side, Nina stood beside her husband, holding his hand. She had come ready to face excuses, not an apology. Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't know what had changed the man, but something clearly had. Afterward, the couple returned home. Nina sat quietly, still processing what had happened. "Why would he give up like that?" she asked. "I thought they'd protect him." Elijah smiled gently. "Sometimes people just need to see what happens when they go too far." As they sat together, Nina looked at him carefully. "I've always wondered about your job. The calls, the travel, you've never told me what you really do." Elijah's smile faded into something softer. "You don't have to worry," he said. "My job is to keep you safe. That's all that matters." Nina nodded, comforted, but deep down, the mystery of Elijah's past still lingered. She wanted to ask more questions, to understand what had really happened. But she trusted him. He had always protected her, and she knew he would do whatever it took to keep their family safe. Later that night, after Nina went to rest, Elijah sat alone in his office. His phone buzzed quietly. The message read, "Everything has been taken care of. Reports are in. Higher authorities have been notified. Cole won't be able to hide." Elijah nodded and replied, "Thank you." He didn't stop there. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a small metal box. Inside were documents, badges, photos from past missions, multiple passports, and encrypted devices. At the center was a CIA badge with his real name and title. Elijah was not just a businessman, he was a trained operative with access to tools, information, and skills far beyond the ordinary. Over the years, those skills helped him gather evidence, protect his loved ones, and make sure anyone who crossed him faced the consequences. But Nina never knew the full extent of what he had done for her, and he planned to keep it that way. He gently touched a framed photo of Nina on his desk, taken on a sunny, happy day. She deserved a life without fear, and he would give her that no matter what. The story ends with Elijah walking into the bedroom. Nina stirred, opened her eyes, and smiled softly. "Is everything okay?" she whispered. Elijah sat beside her, placing a hand on her belly. "Everything's fine," he said. "No one will ever hurt our family again." She smiled and drifted back to sleep, comforted by his words. The camera pans away, focusing on Elijah's hand resting protectively over her stomach, a quiet promise that he would always be there. The final scene shows the metal box locked away again, hidden in the shadows. The mystery of Elijah's past remains, but now the audience understands that the quiet man beside Nina was capable of extraordinary things, all in the name of love and protection. A few weeks later, the small town of Harrison still hadn't stopped talking. Life seemed to go back to normal. Yet her name remained on everyone's lips, from quiet conversations in coffee shops to morning prayers in churches and lessons in school classrooms. People called her many things: the brave mother, the woman who stood tall, the spark for change. The video wasn't trending anymore, but its impact stayed. It had become a symbol, a warning, a lesson, and a call to action all at once. A month later, the city council held a public hearing. For the first time in years, the room was full, not with anger or protest signs, but with community members proposing real changes. New policies were discussed: mandatory emotional control training for officers, de-escalation techniques, and courses on unconscious bias. For some, it was just a start. For others, it was more than they ever thought possible in a town like theirs. But the biggest shift didn't happen in policy. It happened in people. Teachers began sharing her story in classrooms to teach courage. Pastors preached about justice from the pulpit, reminding their congregations that faith must come with action. Mothers brought her flowers and tears in the hospital, whispering thank you as if she had stood up for all of them. As for Elijah, he returned to daily life, quiet as always. But everyone around him could tell something had changed. He smiled less. He watched more. He kept his phone closer, never far from reach. Not because he was afraid, but because he was ready. He had done what he needed to do, and he knew he'd do it again, if it meant protecting his family. Without ever revealing what truly happened, he had become something more than a husband. He was a quiet guardian, and that was enough. Her story, their story, wasn't a headline to forget. It became a turning point, a moment that showed justice doesn't always come from the system, but from ordinary people who refuse to stay silent. A pregnant woman walking to the store changed the hearts of a town, not with anger, but with strength. She was knocked down in broad daylight, but she rose with a power stronger than any badge. And now, every time someone speaks her name, they don't just remember what happened, they remember what changed. From this story, we learn a timeless lesson. Justice doesn't always come from courts or laws. Sometimes it comes from courage, from the hearts of those who choose to stand up when others remain silent. A pregnant woman was attacked in broad daylight, but she wasn't alone. True strength isn't always loud, it's found in quiet resistance. Her calm defiance, combined with her husband's love, changed an entire town and maybe more. The message is clear: silence allows injustice to grow. But small acts of courage can spark real change. So what can we do today? We can listen, speak out, and protect those who can't protect themselves. In the next 5 years, we can become leaders, educators, or advocates, people who help build a fairer society. Will racism end by 2040? Maybe not. But if each of us does our part, if we raise our children to love, not hate, and choose justice over silence, then by 2040, the world will surely be better than it is today. And people like her, those who rise with quiet strength, will always light the way. Note: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.